What I saw after death turned out to be so unusual that it did not fit into any familiar ideas about the otherworldly realm. As it turned out, even heaven itself can be truly shocking. I had no doubt whatsoever. It was exactly there that I happened to find myself. Yet what appeared before me only partially resembled everything people usually say about this magnificent place. Having lived through such an experience, I can state with complete certainty, most of what is said about the higher spheres of the otherworld is pure lies. Everything there is arranged in a completely different way. These words belong to the geologist Arthur Jensen, who was given by fate the chance to see the afterlife, more precisely, those regions that people customarily call heaven. Arthur Jensen, being a strict scientist, always mocked the belief in the existence of the soul, and even more so, in the reality of the afterlife. He rejected any religious and esoteric ideas. Everything changed radically after. In August of 1932, Arthur Jensen got into a car accident that ended with the complete cessation of his heartbeat. It was then that he experienced a near-death state, visited the otherworldly realm, and returned with revelations that take one's breath away. What Arthur Jensen told about the structure of heaven is astonishing to the core. Here is how he described his experience. At the moment when the doctors recorded the time of my death, I felt the soul beginning to leave the body. Naturally, this amazed me enormously because, like any atheist, I did not expect this at all. According to Arthur Jensen, when his soul was separating from the flesh, he felt fear. It seemed that if he lost this connection completely, he would die forever. But no matter how scared he was, he could no longer stop what was happening. He recalled, "Fortunately, nothing terrible happened. My soul or consciousness, in a single word, my true essence, slowly and completely came out of the body through the crown of my head, and I felt the connection with the flesh break." Then Arthur Jensen began rising upward, first above his own body, then above the hospital, and then higher and higher, until the earth disappeared from view. For a brief moment, his consciousness seemed to shift, as if tuning into another frequency of perception. After this, a new world opened before him, becoming brighter and more real with every moment. The next shift in perception brought Arthur Jensen to a beautiful meadow. In the distance stood two tall mountains with snowy peaks, and their slopes were adorned with plants of indescribable beauty. It seemed to him that the mountains were tens of kilometers away, yet he could see every flower growing on them. After some time, when his metaphysical vision, as he said, strengthened hundreds of times, he could distinguish even more details, and the landscape filled his soul with awe and delight. Soon he saw people who, as it first appeared to him, were engaged in something or playing. Sensing his gaze, they stopped, and several of them approached to greet him. Each of them looked to be more than 20 to 30 years old. Arthur Jensen said he was mesmerized by their grace and lightness. One of these strangers told him that he was in another world, and explained the extraordinary abilities of the inhabitants of that realm. For example, they do not experience fatigue, can read thoughts, and can instantly move to any place they wish. But such abilities belong only to those who reside in heaven. It was precisely here that Arthur Jensen had arrived. The inhabitants of that world told him that people mistakenly believe heaven is a place of eternal carefreeness, where one can simply enjoy themselves and do nothing. Such notions are held only by those who lived an empty, useless life on earth. Here is how Arthur Jensen spoke about this. In the higher layers of the otherworld, souls are engaged in meaningful activity, above all in working on themselves, developing their own spiritual qualities, because it is precisely there that they can fully reveal their talents and abilities. There is no place for laziness or idleness in heaven, and those who imagine it as some kind of sanatorium are deeply mistaken. Do not expect that the highest level of existence will match your naive and selfish ideas. Everything is arranged far more wisely than you can imagine. What Arthur Jensen saw around him filled him with admiration, but at one moment he suddenly felt that he had already been here. This is how he described it. Contemplating all the magnificence of the heavenly realm, I suddenly felt that this place was familiar to me. Perhaps I had been here before. Then it dawned on me, and I remembered that this is my true home. In earthly life I had been only a temporary guest, a wanderer longing for what rightfully belonged to me. While being in heaven, Arthur Jensen understood many things about the structure of the other world. In particular, he realized why this realm of existence is eternal. This is because its elements do not mix or disintegrate as they do in the material world. Each element is held in its place by the force of all forgiveness and is not subject to decay. Naturally, having completely abandoned his former atheist views, Arthur Jensen asked the inhabitants of that world what God looks like. To his surprise, no one had ever seen him, but not because he is absent, rather because the Lord is so great that even souls dwelling in heaven cannot perceive him with their eyes. However, without exception, everyone there feels a powerful stream of love, goodness, and wisdom emanating from him. Arthur Jensen called this radiation a super-vibration. According to him, it comes from God, and with it, he governs the entire universe and maintains order within it. Moreover, the super-vibration penetrates all existence, and this is precisely why it is said that the Lord is present in every particle of creation. Already being in heaven, Arthur Jensen grasped a simple truth. In order to understand God, one must become as elevated as he is. And this can be achieved only through constant self-improvement. This is the true purpose of heaven, not for souls to indulge in idleness, but for them to engage in deep spiritual development, drawing nearer to the Creator. Here is how he spoke about this. Some people believe in God, others do not. But as soon as we face trouble, we begin to pray as if he truly exists. It turns out that no matter how much we deny this, somewhere deep inside we know perfectly well that God is real. Now even I, a former atheist, understand God is a combination of many aspects, the incomprehensible laws of nature, light, electricity, gravity, time, space, infinity, and life itself. Arthur Jensen also learned that after death, not all souls reach this wonderful place. Each person receives in the afterlife either a reward or a punishment. Everything depends on the true essence of the soul, meaning which vibrations prevail within it. After the completion of the earthly path, souls separate into high and low vibrations. High vibrations indicate kindness, selflessness, and spiritual maturity during life, while low vibrations show that a person was concerned only with fulfilling their own selfish desires. But a soul can exist only in that realm of the other world, whose vibrations correspond to its inner state. In that world, the law of similarity operates. High vibrations lift the soul into heaven, while low ones pull it toward those regions that people call hell. Here is what Arthur Jensen said about this. Some believe that hell is a place of eternal cold. Others are convinced it is a fiery abyss, and in their own way both are right. There truly reigns cold, but it is not physical cold. It is subtle, energetic. It arises because souls in those places exist on extremely low vibrations and perceive everything around them as an icy emptiness. Low vibrations are born out of such qualities of the soul as hatred, greed, selfishness, malice, indifference, cynicism, and similar traits. Yet these unfortunate souls continue to feel their familiar earthly desires, which now cannot be satisfied, since in the otherworldly realm there is no dense matter. It is precisely these unfulfilled desires that ignite a fire within the soul, the flame of eternal thirst and torment. As a result, from the outside the soul is surrounded by icy cold, while inside it rages with hellfire. All this together forms the total darkness of hell. Arthur Jensen also noted that such souls need help because they cannot escape on their own. Therefore, from time to time, higher beings descend into these gloomy regions to show the way to those who are ready to repent of their dark deeds and begin the ascent toward the true heaven. During the conversation with his new companions, Arthur Jensen noticed that his consciousness was becoming ever clearer. He understood that every event of earthly life has its own purpose. And it was at that very moment that one of his interlocutors told him that the time had come for him to return to the earthly world. This caused deep indignation in Arthur Jensen. He absolutely did not want to leave that astonishing realm and began begging for the chance to stay. However, the inhabitants of the otherworldly space were unyielding. Their main argument was that on Earth he still had an important mission to fulfill. One day a period of great turmoil will come, they told me, and people will need your spiritual support. And when your earthly purpose is completed, you will be able to return to this wonderful world and remain in it forever. After these words, I felt a slight tingling and a sensation as though of compression. And a moment later, I opened my eyes in my own body. Now, having lived through this unique experience, I will not hide the fact that I am sincerely glad to have been mistaken in my former beliefs about the nature of the human metaphysical essence and, in particular, about the existence of the afterlife. Now I have enough courage to admit, any atheist, even the one who fiercely denies the spiritual reality, deep inside still hopes that life does not end with the death of the body, but continues in some other form. No matter how many times people repeat, like parrots, that no one has ever returned from the other side, they nevertheless continue to show interest in this topic, to read books and watch films about posthumous existence. But if they are so sure that there is no other world, then why do they keep coming back to this question again and again? This is nothing but a peculiar form of self-deception. Another person who also happened to visit the beyond and return from there with a special spiritual task was Vincent Hensley. In 2011, at the age of 60, he underwent clinical death and found himself in heaven. And it happened as follows. While working on his farm in a quiet corner of Switzerland, he was driving a tractor along a mountain slope when, by absurd chance, some insect flew into his eye and caused a brief loss of vision. As a result, Vincent lost control of the machine, and the tractor rushed headlong into a deep ravine. He had no choice. To survive, he needed to jump. And that is exactly what he did. But the out-of-control machine struck him and dragged him along, after which Vincent lost consciousness. When he came to, he discovered that he was in the heavens, that is, in heaven. He could not call that place anything else. Here is what he recounted. Finding myself in heaven, I saw many unusual things. For example, shapes resembling silhouettes. They could not be called human, but it seemed to me that I recognized some of them. I felt that they were dear to me, as if they were my relatives, perhaps my parents, who were waiting for me there. Although I did not recognize them outwardly, there were also other beings made of light. Their presence was a blessing to me. Then Vincent Hensley saw something descending toward him from above. He called it a manifestation of the higher forces. These forces brought goodness. As they approached, everything around became filled with bright golden light, and power and wisdom emanated from them. They told him that he truly was in heaven, but that he nevertheless had to return back to the earthly world. The higher forces entrusted him with conveying his experience through words and paintings that he would be obliged to create. Vincent was stunned. He had never known how to draw. Moreover, he had never even tried painting. But one of the voices of the higher forces insisted that he must begin creating paintings about the other world and showing them to people all over the globe. This task seemed impossible to the farmer and at the same time almost sacred. He promised to do everything he could, but admitted that he did not possess the required skills. Then the higher forces reassured him and promised that after his return, the circumstances would unfold in such a way that help would come naturally. As soon as Vincent Hensley agreed to undertake this mission, his return began. But prior to that, he was shown many realms of heaven, so that he would remember everything as clearly as possible, especially the vibrations that existed in those spheres, so that he could later attempt to convey them in his paintings. When Vincent returned to his body, he had to endure terrible pain before he was able to recover from the accident. Here is what he said about that period. For a long time I was tormented by pain, but what troubled me most was whether I would be able to fulfill the task entrusted to me by the higher forces of heaven. I understood that I had been returned for the sake of this mission, but what if I could not paint? What would they do with me then? This thought gave me no rest. But one night, still undergoing rehabilitation in the hospital, Vincent felt an irresistible urge to get out of bed and start painting. He did not know how to use paints or a brush. Moreover, He had no idea what exactly he was supposed to depict, but he felt a power behind him that was ready to guide him. Hensley painted all night and then fell asleep. Here is how he recalled it. Of course, these paintings were not mine. Yes, my hands created them, but through them worked the higher forces from another realm. I had been in the spiritual world and returned to life on the condition that I fulfill the mission entrusted to me. Since then, I have felt like a connecting link between heaven and earth. I am happy that, to the best of my ability, I am carrying out the assignment given to me by the higher forces. And I also want to say that every person must prepare for life after death, because it exists regardless of whether you believe in it or not. Each of us has our own task, and we must do everything possible to fulfill it, because what awaits us beyond the boundaries of earthly existence depends directly on this.